Rising from the East River, just a short distance from Manhattan, sits a complex few New Yorkers ever see yet millions have been affected by. Rikers Island. For decades, it has functioned as one of the largest jail systems in the United States. A place designed to hold people awaiting trial, serving short sentences, or moving through the legal process. But Rikers is not just a jail. It is a system under strain, a facility surrounded by controversy, and a name that has become synonymous with violence, neglect, and institutional failure. Unlike federal prisons built for long-term confinement, Rikers operates on constant motion, thousands of individuals move in and out each year. Court dates, transfers, releases, new arrivals. That constant turnover creates instability. And instability creates pressure. Over time, that pressure has reshaped daily life inside the facility, reports from oversight agencies, court filings. And investigative journalism describe an environment where control is often fragile, where staff shortages collide with overcrowding, where medical and mental health services struggle to keep pace, and where moments of crisis can escalate quickly. Rikers Island has been described as many things: a holding center, a gateway into the justice system, a symbol of urban incarceration. But to those who pass through its gates, whether briefly or for months, it becomes something else. Entirely a place where unpredictability replaces routine, where noise never truly fades, and where safety is not always guaranteed. This is not a story about a single incident or a single person. This is a story about a system, how it functions, how it breaks down, and how the consequences ripple outward to families, staff, and the city beyond the island. To understand Rikers Island, you have to look past the headlines, past the statistics, and into the daily reality of a facility under constant stress. Because what happens on Rikers doesn't stay on Rikers. It shapes lives, it shapes communities, and it forces a difficult question. What happens when the place meant to hold order begins to struggle under its own weight? Rikers Island is not a prison you slowly adjust to. It hits you all at once: the noise, the movement, the constant tension, from the moment someone enters the facility. It becomes clear that this is not a place built for stability. It is a place built to contain chaos, and often it struggles to do even that. Unlike federal prisons designed around rigid structure and silence, Rikers Island operates at the opposite extreme. The jail complex holds thousands of individuals, most of whom have not been convicted of a crime. They are awaiting trial, hearings, or decisions that may take months or years to arrive. This creates a population in limbo: men and women who don't know when they're leaving, who don't know what comes next, who live every day under pressure, uncertainty, and frustration. And that pressure fills every corner of the jail. Cells are loud. Housing units are crowded. Voices echo down narrow corridors at all hours of the day and night, not shouting, not arguing. Banging on doors. Radios crackling. Metal gates slamming shut. Sleep is irregular. Privacy is non-existent. And calm moments are rare. Correction officers are often responsible for more people than policy recommends. Staffing shortages mean fewer eyes on housing units, slower responses to incidents, and limited ability to intervene before conflicts escalate. Inside Rikers, tension doesn't build slowly. It stacks. Every delay, every missed meal, every locked door, every unanswered request. Small frustrations pile on top of one another until they become something heavier, something volatile. Mental health challenges are widespread inside the jail. Many individuals arrive already struggling with trauma, addiction, or untreated psychological conditions. Inside Rikers, access to consistent care is limited, and disruptions are common: missed appointments, delayed medication, overcrowded mental health units. For some, the environment amplifies existing conditions. For others, it creates new ones: anxiety, depression, paranoia, emotional instability. And in a setting where personal space is scarce and tempers are already stretched thin, those struggles don't stay contained, they spill outward. Rikers Island is also defined by movement or the lack of it. Lockdowns can happen suddenly. Entire housing units can be confined for hours or days. Court appearances are missed, visits are canceled, routines are broken without warning. For people already living without control over their future, losing control over their daily schedule only deepens resentment, and resentment has consequences. Inside Rikers, disputes rarely stay verbal. Arguments escalate quickly. Fights break out without warning. Weapons are improvised from everyday objects in a place where fear and frustration coexist. Survival often means projecting strength even when it's dangerous to do so, for correction. Officers. The environment carries its own toll. They work long shifts under constant stress. They make rapid decisions in unpredictable situations. They operate in a system where resources are stretched and public scrutiny is relentless. Mistakes happen, delays happen, breakdowns happen, and when they do, the consequences can be severe for staff and incarcerated individuals alike. This is the reality of daily life at Rikers Island. Not a single moment of chaos, but a constant undercurrent of it. A system operating under strain. An environment where tension is normal, a place where instability is part of the routine, and when instability becomes routine, something else follows: violence, neglect, tragedy. Because at Rikers Island, the conditions don't just exist in the background, they shape what happens next, and what happens next has made Rikers Island one of the most dangerous jail complexes in America. That is where the story goes next. Violence at Rikers Island is not an isolated problem. It is a pattern, a cycle reinforced by overcrowding, understaffing, and an environment where tension rarely has a release valve. Inside the jail complex, physical confrontations can begin without warning, arguments over space. Perceived disrespect, delayed services, or misunderstandings escalate quickly. In close quarters, with limited supervision and high stress, even minor disputes can turn serious in seconds. Fights break out in housing units, bathrooms, day rooms, and corridors. Some involve fists, others involve improvised weapons, objects reshaped into tools of harmony. Place where safety depends on constant vigilance. For incarcerated individuals, the threat of violence becomes part of daily life. Many learn to stay alert at all times, even while sleeping. Others withdraw, avoiding interaction whenever possible. But avoidance is not always enough. For staff, responding to violence is a constant demand. Officers are expected to intervene quickly, restore order, and protect lives, often while outnumbered and under-resourced. Delayed response times, caused by staffing shortages or lockdown procedures, can allow situations to escalate beyond control. When violence occurs at Rikers Island, the consequences are often severe. Injuries are common. Hospitalizations occur regularly, and in some cases, lives are lost. Deaths at Rikers Island have drawn national attention. Some involved assaults by other incarcerated individuals. Others occurred during medical emergencies, mental health crises, or while individuals were held in restrictive conditions. Each case carries its own details, but together they point to deeper systemic issues. Many of the individuals who died at Rikers were awaiting trial. They had not been convicted of the charges that brought them to the jail. Their deaths raised urgent questions about accountability, care, and oversight in a facility designed for temporary detention. Investigations following these deaths often revealed troubling patterns: delayed medical responses, failure to conduct regular checks, inadequate mental health monitoring, breakdowns in communication between staff and medical personnel. In some cases, warning signs were present but not acted upon in time. Public reports described individuals who requested help repeatedly, who showed visible signs of distress, who were placed in isolation without adequate support. By the time intervention occurred, it was too late. The violence at Rikers does not exist in isolation from mental health conditions. Many incidents involve individuals experiencing psychological distress, emotional instability, or untreated conditions. In a high-stress environment, those struggles can manifest as self-harm, aggression, or withdrawal. Solitary or restrictive housing, sometimes used to manage behavioral issues, has been heavily scrutinized. Critics argue that isolation can worsen mental health symptoms, increasing the risk of self-harm and emotional deterioration. Supporters claim it is sometimes necessary to prevent immediate harm. The debate continues. but the outcomes remain difficult to ignore. Behind every statistic is a human life, a family waiting for answers, a system forced to confront its limitations. For correction officers, these incidents leave lasting effects. Responding to violence, witnessing injuries or deaths, and working in a constant state of alert takes a psychological toll. Many officers report burnout. Stress-related health issues and emotional fatigue, turnover increases. Experience is lost, and the cycle repeats as incidents accumulate. Rikers Island has become a focal point for legal action and federal oversight, lawsuits, court orders. And external monitoring efforts have attempted to address conditions inside the jail. Reform plans have been proposed, timelines have been announced, oversight bodies have issued warnings. Yet, meaningful change has proven difficult. The scale of the facility, the size of the population, the complexity of the system, each factor makes reform slow and fragile. What emerges is not a story of a single failure, but of systemic breakdown, a facility strained beyond its limits, a structure that struggles to meet the basic demands of safety care and control. Rikers Island continues to operate under intense scrutiny because what happens inside its walls does not stay there. The violence, the deaths, the unanswered questions, they shape public trust, influence policy debates, and force a broader conversation about how society handles detention, mental health, and accountability. And as long as the system remains under strain, the risk remains. Because when instability becomes normal and oversight becomes reactive, the consequences are measured in human cost, and that cost is far from theoretical. As conditions at Rikers Island drew increasing public attention, the response did not come from a single source. It came from courts, from federal investigators, from oversight agencies, and from families demanding accountability. Over time, the volume of complaints, lawsuits, and incident reports reached a point where internal reform was no longer considered sufficient. External intervention became unavoidable. Federal oversight entered the picture after repeated findings that conditions inside Rikers posed serious risks to incarcerated individuals. Investigations cited persistent violence, inadequate medical care, failures in supervision, and systemic breakdowns in accountability. These were not isolated incidents. They were described as structural problems embedded in daily operations. Court filings outlined patterns that raised alarms, inconsistent staffing levels, delayed emergency responses, breakdowns in mental health monitoring, failure to follow established safety protocols in response. Legal actions sought to compel change through enforceable mandates rather than voluntary reforms. A federal monitor was appointed to oversee conditions at Rikers Island. The monitor's role was not to manage daily operations, but to assess compliance, track progress, and report findings directly to the court. This marked a significant shift. Oversight was no longer internal or advisory, it became judicial. Reports from monitoring teams documented both progress and persistent challenges. While some policies were revised and training programs expanded, implementation often lagged behind intention. Staffing shortages continued, violence remained high. Emergency response times still varied widely across housing units. Reform plans were announced with clear benchmarks and deadlines. These included improving medical response systems, expanding mental health services, strengthening use of force oversight, and reducing reliance on restrictive housing. On paper, the plans were detailed and ambitious. In practice, progress was uneven. One of the core obstacles was scale. Rikers Island is not a single jail, it is a complex of facilities with thousands of individuals and thousands of staff. Coordinating reform across such a system requires consistency, resources, and time. Even well-designed policies can falter without adequate staffing and sustained leadership. Staffing itself became a central issue. Chronic shortages strained operations, increased over time, and reduced supervision in housing units. Officers were often assigned double shifts, contributing to fatigue and burnout as experienced personnel left. New hires faced steep learning curves in an already volatile environment. Labor disputes and management challenges further complicated reform efforts. Changes intended to improve safety sometimes clashed with operational realities or staffing constraints. Each adjustment required negotiation, retraining, and adaptation, slowing the pace of meaningful change. Meanwhile, public confidence continued to erode. Families of incarcerated individuals spoke out, describing difficulty obtaining information during emergencies and frustration with delayed responses. Advocacy organizations called for faster action, citing ongoing injuries and deaths as evidence that reform was moving too slowly at the political level. Rikers Island became a focal point of broader criminal justice debates. City and state officials proposed long-term plans, including reducing reliance on the facility and transitioning toward alternative detention models. Timelines were announced, commitments were made. But timelines shifted, budgets fluctuated, and the facility continued operating day after day. Federal officials emphasized that oversight was not about punishment, but preventing harm before it occurs, identifying risks early, and enforcing accountability when standards are not met, yet even with monitoring in place. The environment inside Rikers remained fragile. Reform under court supervision is not immediate. It is incremental. It requires sustained pressure, transparent reporting, and consistent follow-through, and in a system already under strain. Setbacks can undo months of progress in a matter of days. What Section 4 reveals is essential. Truth about Rikers Island. Change is possible, but it is difficult, slow, and constantly tested. Oversight alone does not fix a system. Court orders do not automatically translate into safety. Reform is not a single event, it is an ongoing struggle. And as legal battles continue and monitors file report after report, one reality remains unchanged. People continue to live and work inside the facility while reform unfolds around them. For them, the outcome is not abstract. It is immediate. It is personal. And it carries real consequences. In the next section, the focus shifts from the system itself to the people navigating it every day, those who live under its rules, and those tasked with enforcing them inside one of the most scrutinized jail complexes in the United States. Inside Rikers Island, daily life is defined by routine but not by stability. Each day begins the same way. Counts, meals, movement schedules. On paper, the structure appears orderly. In reality, the experience depends heavily on staffing levels, housing assignments, and the behavior of others in close quarters. Small disruptions can quickly ripple outward, affecting entire housing units. For incarcerated individuals, the day often starts early, with head counts conducted before dawn. Meals are delivered on rigid schedules, sometimes eaten inside housing areas, sometimes in communal spaces depending on classification and facility, access to showers, phone calls, recreation, and programs are strictly controlled and often delayed. Waiting is constant, waiting for doors too. Open, waiting for escorts, waiting for medical attention, waiting for legal visits. When staffing shortages occur, movement is often restricted. Entire units may remain locked down for hours longer than scheduled. Appointments are postponed. Recreation time is canceled. Tension builds as uncertainty replaces routine. Housing units vary widely across the Rikers complex. Some consist of dorm-style layouts with rows of bunks. Others are made up of individual cells ranged along narrow corridors. In both settings, noise is constant, voices, doors, radios, and the echo of activity from neighboring units. Privacy is minimal. Personal space is limited. Belongings are few. Every action is observed or overheard. Conflicts can arise quickly in such environments. Crowding, stress, and prolonged confinement increase the risk of confrontations. Arguments over seating, property, or perceived disrespect can escalate rapidly if not addressed early. Officers are trained to intervene, but reduced staffing can limit visibility and response time. Mental health challenges are widespread. A significant portion of the population at Rikers requires mental health services, ranging from counseling to intensive psychiatric care. Specialized units exist, but capacity is limited. Delays in treatment and gaps in supervision have been documented by oversight agencies. For Individuals experiencing mental health crises, the environment can intensify symptoms. Loud noise, unpredictable movement, and extended periods of confinement can worsen anxiety, depression, and disorientation. Access to consistent care becomes critical, but consistency is difficult to maintain in a strained system. Medical care presents similar challenges. Routine appointments must be coordinated around security and staffing constraints. Emergency situations require rapid response, yet response times can vary depending on location and available personnel. Oversight reports have repeatedly emphasized the importance of timely care, noting instances where delays had serious consequences. Communication with the outside world is limited but vital. Phone calls are scheduled and monitored. Mail is screened and processed through secure systems. Visits, when approved, follow strict protocols. For many individuals, contact with family or legal counsel is the primary emotional anchor. Missed calls or delayed visits can heighten feelings of isolation and frustration. For those awaiting trial, uncertainty about case timelines adds another layer of stress. Staff members face their own pressures. Correction officers work long shifts in demanding conditions. They must maintain order, respond to incidents, and document everything, often while covering additional responsibilities due to staffing shortages. Fatigue and burnout are common concerns raised in internal reports and public testimony. Most interactions between staff and incarcerated individuals are brief and procedural. Instructions are given, rules are enforced, documentation follows. Yet within these routine exchanges, moments of tension or misunderstanding can arise, sometimes with serious consequences. Despite the challenges, adaptation occurs. Incarcerated individuals develop personal routines to cope: reading, exercising in limited space, keeping track of days through small rituals, avoiding unnecessary conflict. Survival often means staying aware, staying calm, and staying invisible when possible. Some seek structure through programs, education, or work assignments when available. Others withdraw, conserving energy and avoiding attention. Both responses are shaped by the environment, by what feels safest in a system where unpredictability is common. What daily life at Rikers reveals is not a single narrative, but many overlapping ones. A system under pressure, people adapting to confinement, staff balancing control and safety, a facility functioning despite constant strain. Each day passes without headlines, without cameras, without public attention, and yet within those days, decisions are made, tensions rise and fall, and lives are shaped in ways that extend far beyond the walls of the jail complex. Violence inside Rikers Island is not constant, but it is persistent. Most days pass without major incidents, yet the underlying conditions: crowding, stress, untreated mental illness, and staffing shortages create an environment where violence can emerge suddenly and escalate quickly. Altercations often begin small: a verbal dispute, a perceived slight, a disagreement over space or belongings. In close quarters, where privacy is scarce and tensions run high, these moments can spiral. What might be diffused in another setting can become physical within seconds, when officers are present and able to intervene quickly. Incidents may end with minimal harm when staffing levels are thin or visibility is limited. Situations can worsen before help arrives. Certain housing units experience higher risk than others. Individuals awaiting trial, those with behavioral histories, and those experiencing mental health crises may be housed in specialized areas. While these units are designed for increased supervision, they also concentrate vulnerability when resources are stretched. Maintaining safety becomes more difficult. Weapons inside Rikers are often improvised. Objects meant for daily use, plastic items, metal fragments, broken materials, can be altered and used as tools for harm. Searches and inspections are conducted regularly, but contraband still finds its way into housing areas. Each discovery highlights the ongoing challenge of maintaining control in a densely populated environment. Mental health emergencies are a significant factor. Many incidents are not acts of aggression driven by intent, but responses to psychological distress. Individuals experiencing paranoia, panic, or disorientation may act unpredictably without timely intervention. These episodes can end in injury to themselves, to others, or to staff. Crisis response protocols exist, but execution varies. When an incident occurs, officers are trained to secure the areas, separate involved individuals, request medical or mental health support, document the event. Specialized response teams may be DEP. Lloyd, in serious situations, medical staff are called when injuries occur. Mental health professionals are notified when behavior indicates distress or instability. However, delays can occur. Limited staffing, multiple incidents happening simultaneously, physical distance between units. In such cases, response times may increase, sometimes with serious consequences. Oversight bodies have repeatedly emphasized the importance of rapid intervention. Especially during medical or psychiatric emergencies, use of force is closely regulated. Officers are trained to use only the level of force necessary to restore control and ensure safety. Each incident involving force is documented and reviewed. Still, debates continue over appropriate thresholds, training adequacy, and accountability. For incarcerated individuals, the perception of safety varies widely. Some report feeling most at risk during periods of inactivity, late nights, extended lockdowns, or delayed movements. Others describe heightened tension during transfers, recreation periods, or meal distribution. When many people are moving at once, fear does not always come from direct threats. It comes from unpredictability, from noise, from watching incidents unfold nearby, from not knowing how quickly help will arrive if something goes wrong. Staff members face risks as well. Correction officers operate in a challenging environment where vigilance is constant. Assaults on staff do occur, often during attempts to break up fights or respond to crises. Fatigue and burnout increase the difficulty of maintaining situational awareness. Despite this, many officers emphasize de-escalation whenever possible, using communication, presence, and routine enforcement to prevent incidents before they occur. Violence at Rikers is not the result of a single failure. It reflects a convergence of factors. Infrastructure strain, staffing shortages, high mental health needs, overcrowding, inconsistent access to services. Each contributes to an environment where safety must be actively managed every hour of every day. Efforts to reduce violence have included increased monitoring, expanded mental health staffing, revised housing strategies, and oversight reforms. Results have varied, and progress remains uneven. What remains clear is this: safety at Rikers Island is not static. It is something negotiated constantly through policy, staffing, training, and daily decisions made on the ground. Rikers Island does not operate in isolation from the outside world. Few correctional facilities in the United States are as heavily scrutinized, investigated, and debated over the years. Rikers has been the subject of federal inquiries, city audits, court rulings, and independent oversight reports, each attempting to understand why problems inside the jail persist despite repeated reforms. One of the most significant forces shaping Rikers today is external oversight. Federal courts have intervened multiple times, citing concerns over safety, medical care, and the treatment of incarcerated individuals. Court-appointed monitors have been tasked with reviewing conditions, use of force incidents, and compliance with reform agreements. These monitors issue regular reports, detailed documents outlining patterns, failures, and areas where the facility falls short of mandated standards. Their findings often highlight the same issues: delayed medical response, inconsistent supervision, excessive or poorly documented use of force, gaps in mental health care, chronic staffing shortages. Each report adds pressure on city officials to act, but translating recommendations into lasting change has proven difficult. Public attention intensifies after major incidents, when a death occurs, when footage surfaces, or when whistleblowers come forward. Rikers becomes the focus of national headlines, investigations follow, hearings are held, promises are made. Yet as attention fades, critics argue that momentum slows and structural problems remain. Advocacy groups play a significant role in maintaining visibility. Organizations focused on civil rights, mental health, and criminal justice reform regularly document conditions inside the jail through lawsuits, public reports, and media engagement. They push for accountability and transparency. Many argue that Rikers' challenges are not isolated failures but symptoms of a system under extreme strain. City leadership faces a complex balancing act. Officials must address public safety concerns, protect staff, meet legal obligations, and respond to political pressure, all while operating within budget constraints and aging. Infrastructure. Decisions about staffing, housing policies, and facility management are often shaped by competing priorities and limited resources for correctional staff. Oversight can feel both necessary and burdensome. Many officers acknowledge the need for accountability and reform at the same time. They describe working under constant scrutiny where split-second decisions are later dissected in reports and hearing. Thus, morale suffers when officers feel unsupported or blamed for systemic issues beyond there. Control. For incarcerated individuals, oversight represents something else entirely: hope. Hope that mistreatment will be documented. Hope that medical neglect will be addressed. Hope that someone outside the walls is paying attention. Yet hope is fragile. When reforms stall or conditions fail to improve, skepticism grows. Trust in the system erodes further, deepening the divide between those inside and those tasked with managing the facility. Rikers Island exists at the intersection of law, politics, public opinion, and human consequence. Every investigation adds another layer to its history. Every report becomes part of an ongoing record. Every recommendation raises the same question: why does change come so slowly as pressure continues to mount from courts, advocates, and the public? The future of Rikers remains uncertain. Some call for closure. Others argue reform is still possible. What is undeniable is that Rikers has become more than a jail. It is a symbol of how oversight works and where it struggles. A symbol of accountability delayed. A symbol of a system constantly under examination, yet resistant to transformation. By the time an individual reaches Rikers Island, the system around them is already under strain. But inside the jail complex, that strain becomes visible, measurable in response times. Staffing shortages and moments where control slips not because of chaos, but because there are simply not enough people to maintain order. Rikers Island is not one jail. It is a collection of facilities spread across a single island, each with its own housing units, corridors, control rooms, and security demands, and for years, those demands have exceeded the system's capacity. Staffing shortages became one of the most critical pressures on many shifts. Entire housing units were supervised by fewer officers than required. Mandatory overtime became routine, fatigue set in, decision-making slowed, and when a facility designed to operate on precision loses consistency, the consequences compound quickly. Locked doors remained closed longer than scheduled. Medical escorts were delayed. Meal distribution ran late. Recreation periods were shortened or canceled altogether. Each disruption increased tension among incarcerated individuals and staff alike in correctional environments. Predictability is stabilizing. Uncertainty is not, as schedules slipped. Frustration rose. Small disagreements escalated faster. Officers found themselves responding to situations that could have been avoided under normal conditions, and when responses were delayed even by minutes, the risk increased. Medical emergencies exposed the system's fragility most clearly. Reports and investigations later described incidents where individuals waited hours for medical attention. In some cases, symptoms were dismissed. In others, requests were logged but not acted on quickly enough. The problem was not always negligence, it was overload. To many people, to few staff. Too many locked doors between help and the person who needed it. Mental health crises followed her. Similar pattern. Rikers houses a significant population of individuals with diagnosed mental health conditions. Specialized units exist on paper. In practice, staffing gaps and logistical breakdowns often meant those supports were delayed or unavailable. Isolation became a default response, not as treatment, but as containment. For those inside, the message was clear. The system was struggling to keep up with itself. Violence didn't always erupt suddenly. Often, it built quietly through unresolved grievances, missed medical care, canceled movement, and long hours locked inside housing units with nothing to interrupt the pressure. And when incidents did occur, The response was swift but reactive. Emergency teams moved in. Units were locked down. Investigations followed, but the underlying conditions remained unchanged. Rikers was not breaking down in a single moment. It was wearing down day after day under the weight of its own structure. By this stage in the story, one truth becomes unavoidable. Rikers Island was no longer just holding people. It was struggling to function as a system designed to protect life, ensure safety, and maintain order at the same time. And when a jail reaches that point, the consequences extend far beyond its walls, because what happens inside does not stay contained. It shapes court cases. It shapes public trust. It shapes the lives of everyone who passes through it, whether they stay for days, months, or years. For those who leave Rikers Island, whether through release, transfer, or sentence completion, the jail does not simply disappear behind them. It follows. Former detainees often describe the same unsettling experience. The world outside feels louder, faster, and less predictable than they remember. The constant noise of traffic, the movement of crowds, the absence of rigid schedules. After months or years inside a place where every action was controlled, freedom can feel overwhelming rather than liberating. One former detainee described his first night home as more difficult than his final night inside. Rikers, I couldn't sleep, he said. There were too many sounds, too many choices inside. Everything was decided for you. Out here, nothing is. Mental health professionals who work with formerly incarcerated individuals refer to this as institutional adaptation, a psychological state where the mind has adjusted so deeply to confinement. That open environments create anxiety instead of comfort. Common challenges include difficulty concentrating, heightened alertness, emotional numbness, and discomfort in social settings. Simple interactions can feel unfamiliar. Standing too close to walls, avoiding eye contact, scanning rooms automatically, reacting strongly to raised voices. These behaviors are not signs of weakness. They are learned survival responses. Rikers Island does not teach rehabilitation through reflection or skill building. It teaches vigilance. It teaches silence. It teaches endurance. And those lessons do not vanish when the gates open. For families, reunification is often complicated. Loved ones return changed, more guarded, more distant, sometimes emotionally unavailable. Parents struggle to reconnect with children who grew older in their absence. Partners describe feeling as though the person they knew came back altered, shaped by an environment that demanded constant emotional restraint. Reentry programs attempt to bridge the gap, offering counseling, job training, and support services. But demand often exceeds availability. Many individuals leave Rikers with little more than paperwork, a release date, and the expectation that they will simply adjust. Yet adjustment is rarely simple. Some return to unstable housing. Some struggle to find employment with a record tied to pretrial detention rather than conviction. Some carry unresolved trauma from violence they witnessed or endured inside the facility. For those transferred from Rikers to state or federal prisons, the challenges shift rather than disappear. For those released entirely, the world presents a new kind of pressure, one without walls. But filled with uncertainty, Rikers Island does not just confine people temporarily. It leaves an imprint on how individuals move through space, how they interpret danger, how they relate to authority, how they trust or struggle to trust others, and while debates continue over policy reforms, closures, and alternatives, the people who pass through Rikers carry their experiences quietly into everyday life. The jail may be located on an island, but its impact reaches far beyond the water that surrounds it. Rikers Island does not exist in isolation. What happens inside its fences does not stay there. Every year, tens of thousands of people pass through the jail complex, most of them legally innocent, awaiting trial because they cannot afford bail or are trapped in delayed court proceedings. Many stay for days, some for months, others for years, and almost all of them eventually return to the city. That reality makes Rikers more than a jail. It makes it a revolving door between confinement and community. Former detainees often describe leaving Rikers with more than just a release order. They leave with heightened stress responses, difficulty trusting authority, disrupted sleep. and a constant sense of alertness, loud noises feel threatening, crowded spaces feel overwhelming. Simple interactions standing in line, riding public transportation, navigating busy sidewalks can trigger anxiety. Mental health professionals refer to this as institutional adaptation, behaviors formed in environments where unpredictability, tension, and control dominate daily life. These adaptations are not moral failures, they are survival responses. And when individuals return to families, neighborhoods, and workplaces, those responses don't simply disappear. Families feel the impact too. Parents struggle to reconnect with children who grew older during detention. Partners describe emotional distance that wasn't there before. Conversations feel strained. Trust takes time to rebuild. In many cases, the person who returns is not the same person who left. This is why Rikers Island remains at the center of national debate. City officials, legal advocates, correctional experts, and community leaders continue to argue over its future. Some call for closure and replacement with smaller, borough-based facilities. Others warn that structural change without systemic reform will only recreate the same problems in new locations. Staff members face their own challenges. Correctional officers work in an environment defined by constant vigilance, high stress, and limited margin for error. Many report emotional fatigue, burnout, and difficulty separating work from home life. Like detainees, they too are shaped by the conditions of the institution. Rikers affects everyone it touches. That is why it remains one of the most scrutinized correctional facilities in the United States. Not because it is unique in its problems, but because it exposes them so clearly. Rikers Island forces an uncomfortable question, one that has no simple answer. How does a society maintain safety, accountability, and order without losing sight of humanity? The island itself offers no response. It stands where it has always stood, surrounded by water, steel, concrete, and controversy, a place of confinement, a place of transition, a place where policy, punishment, and people collide. And long after the gates close behind those who leave, the effects of Rikers continue quietly shaping lives, communities, and conversations far beyond its walls. That is the lasting legacy of Rikers Island. Not just a jail, but a mirror. If this story helped you understand what life is really like inside America's most notorious detention centers, consider subscribing to the channel. New long-form crime documentaries are released regularly, each one carefully researched, responsibly told, and focused on the realities behind the headlines. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Thank you for watching.